All right. Yeah, so typically, as Dara said, assumptions are predictions that we make. They're predictions that we make. They are what I like to call uneducated. A lot of them are uneducated. All right, they're uneducated. Predictions, we call them assumptions. We shouldn't do it, although it's a kind of how our brains work and operate. Our brains are what we call a pattern-seeking device. Your brain loves patterns. So because your brain loves patterns, it likes to assume things. It likes to make predictions. That's why you like to play puzzles and video games. Your brain enjoys making predictions. That's okay in the entertainment environment, but from a social standpoint, it can be very deadly. In fact, a lot of our social ills and social problems come from assumptions. And from assumptions, we can get different forms of discrimination. And discrimination was one of the words last week, right? Yes. Last chapter. Discrimination. So a lot of discrimination comes from assumptions that people make, and a lot of assumptions comes from ignorance. And ignorance is what? Anybody know what ignorance is?
Yes, it's
Don't care.
feeling you more than
The opposite of
you're more important.
No, ignorance is what?
He don't know what
Right.
we do.
So ignorance is just not knowing. All right. And sometimes it's okay to be ignorant about something as long as you try to learn about it. We all are ignorant about things. The ignorance, the negative, the reason why ignorance is bad is when you want to stay ignorant, all right, and you don't want to learn about something, and you just continue to assume and make assumptions about people because maybe of what you heard or what you feel, what you believe, and if your beliefs are not based on any evidence, and you continue to do it without learning and listening and really observing what's going on. So assuming is a bad thing, because if I ask you to look at 106 and I said make assumptions. Let's see. So make assumptions about, and Thamma said assumption was prediction, right? Make an assumption about the man on 106. What assumptions can you make about him? Can somebody help him out? What assumption can you make about the man on 106?
He looks from Emirate.
All right. The first one is that he's maybe Emirati.
Yes.
All right. And that's based on what?
His thought.
It's based on his dough. All right. That assumption, is that a reasonable assumption? Is that an okay assumption to make?
Yes.
I think that's a reasonable assumption to make. He may not be Emirati, but he has an Emirati dough born.
Yes. He might be a businessman or rich.
Okay. He may be a businessman or rich. How do we know that?
Because of he is meeting another man who looks like a businessman.
Is that a good assumption to make?
No.
Good for him, or bad for him, depending on the situation, right? But you see where it's starting to get a little shady now? Okay, he's a rich businessman. What about this one?
I think that's is an formal appointment because they wear a formal clothes.
All right, they're okay. We can assume that this is kind of a formal meeting. But what assumption can you make about him, in particular, about that man, in particular? He's Emirati. He's probably a rich businessman. What else?
The man on the right, he looks like a well-educated man.
No, I'm talking about the guy on 106. Does the guy on 106 look well? Does he look well educated?
Yes, why not?
Huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Why you so? Why are you kind of hesitant?
I don't think so.
He looks stupid, or he looks educated, or he looks what?
No, he looks not
well
educated.
educated.
He doesn't look well. Why you say he's not well educated? He might have graduated PhD from Cambridge.
Yes.
Or English.
You see where assumptions?
It's not obvious.
But why would you say he may not be educated? Why did you have the inclination that he was less than educated? Let me ask you this. What man is more educated? The man on the left on 106 or the man on 107?
We don't know. We
Oh,
can't-
now you're saying you don't know.
No,
Before we had this conversation, which one would you say was more educated?
No, 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 right.
Why?
Because he's Chinese.
Because he's Chinese. See? First of all, he might not even be
Right,
Chinese.
Arabs not
Right?
educated.
He might not be Chinese.
Agent.
Alright? Why does he look nerdy? Because he has glasses on, right?
Yes.
That's another. So you see how assumptions can lead up to what we call stereotypes. Alright? Assumptions can now lead to what we call stereotypes. Okay. When you start to assume people, then you start to stereotype people, and then when you start to stereotype people, you're putting them in boxes that they may not be associated with. Or they may intentionally want you to put them in a box because they're trying to take advantage of you. You understand? So I'm gonna put these glasses on, even though I'm not that smart. And if I put these glasses on, people are gonna think I'm smart. Or I'm gonna wear this Emirati though, and if I have an Emirati though, people are gonna think I'm from the Emirates. Or I'm gonna wear this though, and people are gonna think I'm rich. Right? And a lot of our social ills come from this. So this is going to be a very interesting chapter when we talk about cultures of the world, especially as we enter or as we start to live and really grind our teeth in the 21st century. It's going to be very interesting how what assumptions are going to be made in the future about people as people become more and more connected online and learn more and more. So a lot of reasons why we assume is because we don't know, because we're ignorant. Okay? Because we haven't had exposure. Right? We haven't been exposed to things. When again, I think I shared this with you before. When I was growing up, there was no internet. You know? I remember being, I grew up in a culture, in a society, in a world that everybody was ignorant to one another. All right? I grew up in a predominantly, or what I thought to be a predominantly black city. And I thought the whole world was black. When I was in middle school, you couldn't convince me that the whole world was black, because all I saw was black people. And we saw some Asians who ran stores, and I thought all Asian people owned stores, and there was a very few part of it, but I thought the world was black. And I think maybe I was in the 7th or 8th grade. I said something to Tina, and she said, "Ray, no, the world's not black." I was like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" Because my world was black. There was no internet. We had television, but television I was disconnected from it. It's like, okay, yeah, these people in television. And a lot of television I was watching was old television, because when I was being raised, everything was in black and white, and for the most part. And I'm not that old, but we still were watching black and white TV. And in the program itself they show a lot of reruns. They don't show reruns anymore. You have to watch the classic TV channels what's the old stuff? TV Land. You guys get TV Land? No. It shows old television shows from the 50s and 60s. I like Hulu over Netflix because Hulu actually shows a lot of old television shows that remind me of my childhood. But now you guys live in a world where everything has to be, you know, everyone is included. We have what we call inclusion. We're including other cultures. You guys are living in a world where you can go online and learn about other people and reality TV, and you start to see that we have more things in common than we do differences. All right. Here's the interesting thing about, you know, cultures before, in my generation, and I'm a generation Xer, and you guys' generation, is I thought there was, I didn't know there was all these different religions. I thought everybody was a Christian. And the funny thing about it, even in my own family, my father's Muslim, but I didn't know my father. I didn't get to know my father, my biological father, until I was a little bit older. And I didn't even know, and when I knew him, I didn't know Muslim, Christian. I thought everybody was Christian. You know, the concept of religion really didn't hit me, even though I went to church every Sunday as a Christian. The concept of religion didn't really hit me until I was well into high school. I just thought everybody was Christian. And I thought you had Christians, you had different types of Christians, and you had Catholics who were kind of like Christian, but they weren't really Christian, but that type of thing. And their services were a lot different than sometimes I would go to church with my uncle who was a Catholic, and that service was totally different than a Christian service, or what I perceive to be a Christian service as a Baptist. But now, young people are very aware about religion now, right? Because of inclusion. Because now they're watching television shows and cartoons where we include different characters. When I was growing up, the only people that were on TV were white people. And every once in a while you see a black person. And the running joke, especially in the 80s, was that here's what you could assume when you watched the movie in the 80s. If there was a black person in the movie in the 80s, he'll be dead within 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes of the movie, he'll be dead. And you could literally set your watch. You're like, all right, it's coming. Brother ain't gonna last too much longer. Oh, you just got hit by the car. All right? Totally different world. Totally different world. Totally different world. So you guys, I didn't know what culture was. Even in high school. My high school had almost 4,000 people in it. My high school had almost 4,000 people. And most of those people were black. It was one culture, it was black culture. And the few white people that were in my school, they were just as black as I was, the way they act. Right? Because they were part of the culture. So it's interesting now as somebody who's 42 years old now, to see how the world has shifted, how the world will continue to shift as it relates to culture. It's very interesting. When I was coming up, for people to get married and they weren't of the same ethnicity, was you saw it, but it was strange. It was weird to see a black person with a white person. It was just weird. I mean, it happened, but it just wasn't normal. Whereas today, you see somebody of two different ethnicities, just say, oh, whatever, not a big deal. So this, the next 2 weeks, we're gonna be talking a lot about culture, and this idea of assumption. Because here's the reason why you don't assume. You look at the word assume, right? And that's what happens when you assume.
Okay.
That's what happens when you assume. Okay. So look at 107. what, what assumptions can we make about the guy in 107?
Smart.
That he's smart.
Yeah.
All Asian people are smart, right?
Yes.
Alright, what else?
Smart as well.
What else? Can we make any other assumptions about him? About him in particular? That's the only one?
Yeah, businessman.
That he's a businessman? Given the setting, we'll say that's a good assumption. Alright? So hopefully one of the things that I want to do in this chapter is help you see when we're making good assumptions and when we're making bad assumptions. Because in the world that you guys are living in and will live in the profession that you're choosing, assumptions can get somebody killed.
Yes.
You can kill somebody because of your assumption. Anybody watch the TV show House?
Oh,
Alright. One of the reasons why, even though House is not a nice guy,
no.
the reason why he's an effective doctor is what?
You can assume.
You can assume.
Well, he makes good predictions.
Yes.
His ability to predict is very good. He makes reasonable, rational predictions. And he doesn't make dumb assumptions about patients. Alright? So whereas the other doctors may assume something about a patient, he don't even make those negative assumptions, even though he's not the nicest guy in the world. Alright, but it makes him an effective doctor. So, you know, as a medical professional, it's gonna be very important that you have a very keen ability to, it's gonna be very keen that you have the ability to, you gotta have a keen ability to not make assumptions and make the right predictions. To not assume, but make professional predictions. Because people are gonna look up to you. You understand this, right? You go into a profession where people are gonna cling on to your every word. So if you start making assumptions, what's gonna happen? It's gonna be okay for what? Everybody else to start to make assumptions. So as a doctor, you're not gonna be able to joke and play around like other people. Because when you joke and play around, other people want to take you seriously. And you're just joking, right? You know, all this is a joke. But people want to take everything you do seriously. And they're gonna try to follow you. So you gotta be, as a doctor, you gotta be very careful. Like, it's okay to joke around with other doctors or whatever, but as a doctor, you're gonna be very careful what you say around your nursing staff, around support staff, because you're gonna be a leader. And then especially if you own your own clinic or you run your own department, it's gonna be very important to how well your patients gets treatment and how well they're open to treatment. Because you gotta also understand that the patient is looking up to you too. And if they're coming into a facility or a department that is where people are making assumptions and they get treated a certain way, they're not gonna have any faith in you, and that's gonna disrupt and have a negative impact on your treatment plan. Alright, and they may refuse. And remember what I said earlier, you guys, hospitals, and this is a prediction that I'm making, hospitals are gonna stop hiring doctors. Hospitals are gonna be just like YouTube. The hospital is gonna be a platform. They're gonna have a stage. And they're gonna have all the latest equipment, all the latest technology, and you're gonna be registered at the hospital. The hospital's gonna vet you. The hospital's gonna vet you, and vet means what?
They take care.
What does vet mean?
when you have a profile there,
You have, and the profile, they do what? They make sure that you're a real doctor.
Yeah.
Alright, they make sure, so the hospital's they're gonna check your Facebook, they're gonna check all your qualifications, all your medical, all your last employer, all these, your
his
clients,
degree.
your degree, make sure that you fit the standards of their platform or their hospital, and they're gonna say, okay, you're good enough to do work and business in our hospital, we'll charge you $1,000 an hour to use our facility, or whatever they charge you, to use our facility. And then we have different packages. You can have your clinic here, or you can have your clinic somewhere else. There are different packages. But most doctors, the relationship with the hospital is gonna change. Where the hospital is just gonna be a platform where they can go and book different, emergency room. All right, I got 3 patients this week, I need to book this room. Okay, and that's how hospitals are gonna start to make money. Because right now, hospitals are not gonna be able to sustain themselves under this term, as we get more and more people in the world, they're not gonna be able to sustain themselves. So they have to look at, how they do business differently. Alright, so what they're gonna do, and anytime there's a change, it always affect human resources and payroll. So they're gonna say, hold on a second, why are we paying doctors $100, $200, $300,000 a year? Why don't we make them pay us? Right? Think about this, think about the number of people who go to a hospital and don't have money. Do you turn them away? Are you supposed to turn them away? No, you're supposed to take care of them. What if they can't pay the bill? Hospital has to take their loss. Still gotta pay the doctor, right? Alright. So it's gonna change. It's gonna most definitely change. Where the doctors are gonna start paying the hospital, and then when you have an emergency, you're gonna call your doctor. Right? And your doctor's gonna tell you where to go and where he'll meet you, or you're gonna have a special contract, or the government will create laws for emergencies.
Yeah.
For emergencies, they'll probably say any emergency you have to take care of, just like in America. Right? So in America, you cannot be turned away. If you are dying, the hospital has to help you. They have to help you by law. But dying meaning you have a critical emergency situation. But if you're dying of cancer, they don't have to help you. All right? So that's where people like you come in, and you're gonna have all these patients who are gonna have different diseases, some terminal, some chronic, right? And you're gonna do your operations in the hospitals. And some hospitals are already doing it like this anyway. Okay? But it's gonna become the standard practice.
After they help you, they ask you for money?
Yeah, they're always gonna ask you for money. But if you can't pay it, it's a different story. If you can't pay it, it's a different story. Alright, so, because eventually governments like the UK, as their population increases and increases, they're either gonna do one or two things: increase the taxes more and more and more, and the taxes are already high, or change the laws about how people get treated. This is why in America, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult decision. Healthcare is a very difficult decision because it's expensive. On top of the fact, doctors still want to make a lot of money, right? So this chapter is actually very, very important to you as a future medical professional, because hopefully I can show you how to make good predictions and how to stay away from assumptions. And again, I assume, you assume, we all assume. This is a part of how we being humans. But we have to reduce our assumptions. All right, we have to reduce or decrease our habit of assuming, because a lot of times we miss out on opportunities because we assume things about people or situations. Right? We just make bad assumptions. Yasser, what assumption have you made about anything? It don't have to be people or a group of people. It could be about a product. What assumptions do you have about something? You want to share an assumption you have about something?
Yeah, like iPhone X.
All right, what's the assumption you make about that?
I think it's not very good.
You don't think? Do you have one?
And no,
But so you're making an assumption because you don't have one. So you say it's not going to be very good. Why do you say it's not going to be very good?
because let's say the designer.
You don't like the design?
No, I don't like it.
What don't you like the design? What do you not like about the design?
The white screen
Okay. And why?
and the edges.
Why?
The edge, it's not very comfortable.
It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable. Talal, what assumptions do you have about people or a product or a city or whatever? Do you have any assumptions? You don't have any assumptions?
I can't think of it.
Okay, then, let me help you out. What, do you have any assumptions about people from Jeddah? Anybody from Jeddah here? You about to get in a fight. Do you have any assumptions about people from Jeddah?
Yeah, I think they may be more open.
That's a common one you hear, that people from Jeddah are more open.
Yeah.
I personally don't see any difference I don't see that, personally.
Because America is very open.
No, but I don't see people from Jeddah being more open than people from Riyadh. I haven't personally saw that. I go to Jeddah a little bit, but that's an assumption. So when you're dealing with somebody from Jeddah, how could that affect how you deal or how you communicate with somebody from Jeddah, Talal? You're gonna think they're more liberal, more open, when in fact, they can be very conservative, very closed. Right? I'll give you an assumption that I don't like here. And this is for people who go to compounds. So when people go to compounds here in Saudi Arabia, they think they can do anything on the compound. They can do anything on the compound. If I get in the compound, I can do anything I want. And the reality is, compounds have more rules than when you're outside. There are more rules.
Yes.
Why? Because people pay a lot of money to live on the compound, and they don't want people doing any and everything in their compound, right? If I'm paying 200,000 riyals a year to live in a compound, do I want people making noise at 3 o'clock in the morning? No, I want quiet, right? I want things clean. And the reality is, I probably don't want a lot of people on the compound, right? Because I want my privacy. So that's an assumption, is that people make that any and everything goes on compounds. It doesn't. Actually, in my compound, it's quite quiet. Why? Because nobody wants a lot of noise on the compound. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.